the NAIRR Pilot Allocations Working Group. He is also co-PI of the NSF Access Allocations Award, and before that, he was the director of the Exceed Resource Allocation Service, so he knows all about that. He's the guy you all want to talk to, have been asking me about allocations all week. Sorry, Dave. So he's also Research Support Division Director at the Computational and Information Systems Lab, or CISL, at the NSF National Center for Atmospheric Research. Before joining NCAR in 2010, he worked for 15 years serving in leadership positions at the San Diego Supercomputer Center. In addition to all of that, closest to my heart is he was general chair of the inaugural PERT conference in 2017 and convinced me to be the PERT 25 chair somehow. He says it's going to be fun. So far, he's right. But like one thing they do say is you can't change what you can't measure. And so for years, I've admired Dave's ability to gather data, convey the insights from that data, and even have good ideas on what we can do to improve things. So please help me welcome Dave Hart.
Okay, thanks for having me here today. Thanks, Dana. I think to that bio, the one thing I wanted to add this morning was that I am one of the people who Katie Antipus introduced yesterday morning as those who had no idea what they were getting into when they were asked to support the NAIRR pilot. That's the most relevant title right now, and in many ways, this talk is a lot about unpacking what it was we actually did get ourselves into. And so to know, as Dana said, what we did is help us know how we can make it better. Let's see. We have a lot of ground to cover, and so first I'm going to talk about the resources available, what's out there, talk a little bit about that proposal process that everyone's interested in and how long it's been taking, and then go through a number of the statistics to unpack what's happening behind the scenes and how we've been doing with the pilot. And then finally, close with some questions to maybe prompt some thinking about later today about how we can make this all better. So first, let's talk about the resources. All right, this is the list of private sector NAIRR pilot resource partners right now. They're very novel kinds of resources. They're so new, we're still trying to figure out exactly what we're offering and how we should allocate them. And any organization, I made this one up. If it's not working for some of you, let me know. We'll figure out a better way to organize them. But as Dana also mentioned, NSF has been supporting high-performance computing resources for the academic community for 40 years at the national centers. And I should plug that where I work now, NCAR has been offering resources for 60 years to the Earth System Science community to do high-performance computing. And I've been there personally 30 years. This has never happened, right? This is what's very special about the NAIRR pilot. This group of private sector companies and nonprofits making their resources available, engaging with the academic community. This is very unique to the NAIRR pilot. This is something I want you to remember as well as we go through some of these further slides. Moving on to the federal sector resources, there are a lot of GPU and CPU-oriented resources here. If you need a GPU type, it's probably out there. And it's changing rapidly. All of this list is changing rapidly. I mentioned I added the PATH facility. That's in my inbox right now to be worked into the NAIRR pilot request format. And even since I submitted my slides, Purdue's talked to me. There's going to be some H100s added to the Anvil system. So that'll be added to the NAIRR pilot in the very near future. And there may be some more private sector partners as well. So we're continually changing. So this resource list, keep an eye on it. There's lots here. And then also among the federally supported systems, there's lots of novel architectures. The Neocortex and Voyager systems offer AI specialized hardware along with the DOE's AI testbed at Argonne. There's a cloud, research cloud at Indiana. There's some composable and distributed systems, the ASIS systems at Texas A&M and the Fabric compute and network platform. That one's another interesting one I'm still trying to figure out exactly how to describe, but I'll let you look at the online description if you want to learn more. And of course, there's the NAIRR Classroom. There's a special set of resources just for the NAIRR Classroom offering. So NIH has offered its Cloud Lab resource, which includes credits for students on the cloud providers. The Prototype National Research Platform is out there. Vocarium is a private sector partner offering their AI notebook. And Indiana's Jetstream 2 and the Google Cloud Platform are also supporting the NAIRR pilot. Now, out of all of that, this is what we started with. There were 6 when we started the NAIRR pilot, right? We made the initial call was in January of 2024. There were 6 of those resources. We are now at 38, and I'm probably over 40 now with the new ones coming online that I haven't had a chance to update these numbers. And depending on how you want to slice them and dice them in the other, on the right here, there are 22 federal agency systems and a lot from the private sector, right? As many or more, depending on how you categorize them, from the private sector. And if you're looking at GPU resources versus the hardware type, there's more novel types of architectures than there are GPU resources out there. And as noted on the slide here, what I want to point out is if you think you can take advantage of these other offerings and you already have a project, you can ask to use them, right? You can submit a request to say, hey, my project would benefit from adding this other resource to my project. You can apply for that and add it to your project. So don't hesitate. Feel free to ask me, go to the website and look about submitting a supplement to your project. Now, let's talk a little bit about the current NAIRR pilot proposal process, right? The proposals are now accepted monthly with a soft deadline of the 15th of the month. And then you see future slides, I'll be using the 15th of the month as kind of where a line break for where the proposals are counted. Proposals are assigned either 1 or 2 reviewers from the community, and it depends on the size of the request. Obviously, 3 reviewers are assigned to the larger requests. The largest ones are discussed at a monthly review committee meeting held virtually, and smaller proposals are sort of determined internally how the reviews should translate to a recommendation from the review side of things. If they are recommended for support, they could be recommended for no support, but if they are for full or partial award, they are shared with the resource providers to say, are you willing to support these projects? And a resource provider may accept the project in full, in part, or they may choose to decline for various reasons. In many cases, it's not a good fit with what that resource actually offers. If it's declined, the project is offered to other providers, so it's not necessarily an end of your project if the original requested provider says no. There's other offerings out there that may pick it up and support that. Anything recommended to be declined is actually shared with the NAIRR program office for their final concurrence with that declination. So before anything is rejected or declined, it goes through a very detailed process that makes sure we are trying to support every meritorious process or project. And then finally, after all of this, the project teams are notified of the proposal outcome, as well as the resource providers. So what happened with this process over the past year or so? Here's the graph of the project's proposals that we received. The first deadline was in March for the initial call. We opened in January, and by mid-February, we had gotten a few proposals which felt pretty good. But then by the time the March deadline rolled around, we had received 163 proposals. And keep in mind, six resources that were available. None of it included any new hardware. This was all existing systems that were in the field that were able to make part of their systems available to the NAIRR pilot. It exceeded everyone's expectations and also our preparations in many ways. After that, there was a bit of a pause in April while we organized our thoughts around the initial call, and then we reopened in May. And then, as you see, we've been sort of, after a bump in June, holding steady between 20 and 40 requests a month. The February date closed after I was finished this chart. There was about another 20 or so from February that we need to include now. Also, 163 requests, we had 12 reviewers ready. For the six resources that we're able to support these. So yes, we weren't the reviewers. They are the heroes of the initial call for slogging through all of those. 9 of them are still with us and still reviewing proposals for reasons I can't really fathom. But thank them for their service if you encounter one of those. To date, we've had about 44 reviewers who have been supporting it. So we have been making progress in bringing on new volunteers. If you would like to participate, you are more than welcome. We will accept reviewers who have submitted proposals, who are thinking of submitting proposals. That is perfectly fine. We will deal with the conflicts of interest. You won't obviously review your own proposal, so on and so forth. It is perfectly reasonable. If you want to help, contact that email address. The chart here just shows the reviews completed per month. Obviously, a lot happened in March and April while we were trying to go through that, but you can see we've been holding pretty steady. Lots of reviews happening over the past year. And again, thanks to all the reviewers for all of that. Now, the average reviewer rating. So trying to get a sense of how have the proposals actually been? And the answer, okay, on average, but just okay, right? We've seen a lot. It's gone up slightly from 2.5-ish, with 0 being a rejection rating and 5 being an excellent. So right in smack in the middle for the initial call, about a 2.5. Slid up to 3, or just a solid good, for January of 2025 so far. And this is an average. It doesn't really say the full story, right? We see a lot that are definitely consistently not good or consistently very good, but a lot that have divergent opinions. And so dealing with those has also been challenging. If the AI part may be very good, but the resource justification may not be as strong, and depending how the reviewers see one or the other, the reviews may come out different, and we have to figure out how to reconcile those opinions, which is definitely a challenge. So that leads us to this chart, which I know is everyone's top of mind, is how long does it take us to do all of this? So this is on average the number of days it takes to go from your submission to your award notification. And when the RPs are notified. And it's taken a while. In March, for the initial call, and because of trying to deal with that backlog, it was taking 3 to 4 months for many proposals to get awarded or a decision made. And that 4 months held for quite a while through July of last year. But since then, you can see, thankfully, we have been making progress. The more recently you've submitted, the better your shots are of getting it within the 30 days we anticipated making these awards. It's been a challenge. It is getting better, but bear with us as we continue to work through the backlog. The holidays helped a little bit. There was a bit of a dip in terms of proposal submissions, but a lot of people disappear on the holidays, including our reviewers, and many people take vacations. So definitely take some time there to make sure all of that happens. Now, why was it so hard to do all of this? Here's where we're looking at the number of requests and the awards made per resource, right? So the orange bars are the requests, the blue bars are what actually was awarded. And this is not amounts, this is the number of proposals, right? So why were so many things not awarded? And this doesn't necessarily mean they were rejected outright or declined outright. You can see, though, that in the federal agency side, most of the busiest requests were on the GPU-oriented resources. It drops down dramatically. And same on the private sector. Most heavily requested systems were the commercial cloud providers, specifically for GPUs, as well as some interest in OpenAI when it became available. But again, and then far over on the right, you can see no resource preference. And I noted there, I do not recommend doing that. We'll talk a little bit about that. That is something we'll have to think about. It is an option, but I would only use that if we were desperate, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's talk about why these proposals disappear and why aren't they being awarded. Resource availability, we're going to talk a little bit more about in the next slide. But we do see some declined proposals, obviously, if the resource justification is not there. We also see that a lot of cases where the proposal team is clearly unaware of what they just asked for. My favorite so far has been, we want to use the PSC's NeoCortex system. We will use its GPUs to do this. For those of you who know, NeoCortex has 0 GPUs. So that was clearly a person who misunderstood or did not read the documentation about the resources that they were requesting. It happens a lot even with flavors of GPUs. You know it has GPUs, but maybe it's not the right ones, and you describe a system that is not the system you're asking. We also see a lot of messy submissions in terms of a proposer who enters multiple systems when they really only want one of them. They'll put in all of their options and say, hey, we want all of these. And in fact, they really want one of these. So that'll also bring down the number of awards that we make per request or per resource. And Another thing that we see is sometimes we see proposals that enter a request or enter a resource in the form, say, I would also like this. But the documentation they provided doesn't mention that resource, so we have no idea how they anticipate using that resource in their project, so we don't support that. Other reasons will come up as well, but I also mentioned the no resource preference, why you should avoid it. First, as I mentioned, identifying a specific resource at least suggests you have looked at what that resource does and have tried to show you understand that your work will be accommodated by that resource hardware. And second, no preference requests often want GPUs, and as we'll see soon, the demand is very high. Resource providers tend to pick those that have already said, I know I can use these GPUs, and they will take those first and then see if there's time available for the no resource preference requests. So it's a challenge. It's something we should consider whether we want to continue offering or not, but it is a nice option if you're not sure, and you can be very flexible. So the bigger issue is availability, the amounts requested and awarded. Let's highlight the red box first. Close to 100 million GPU hours have been requested, right? They're not all valid requests, but that's the numbers that we're trying to sort through. We don't have 100 million GPU hours. That's just not there. The largest system ever in the NAIRR pilot was Oak Ridge's Summit system. It made about 7 million GPU hours available. That was Oak Ridge, a Summit system, a DOE massive scale resource. We don't have 100 million. And you see on the far left of that chart, no resource preference, almost 40 million GPU hours in that category, with NVIDIA's DGX Cloud next with over 30 million GPU hours of requests. It's just not there. The orange bars you see at the bottom is what's been awarded on these various systems. It's much closer to what's actually available in the pilot. So this mismatch is what we've been struggling with, right? There are other units out there, but by and large, it's GPU hours that are the problem. The cloud providers are actually awarded in dollars, but it's generally a straightforward conversion to GPU hours for most of them. And I said the raw data is messy, but it's just, there's no way to say there's not a huge gap between what's requested and what's available. Let's see, so just some notes there. I omitted some resources that are kind of in the noise. And my pet peeve about 80 gigabyte A100s. It's everyone's favorite request. It's also the most scarce thing out there. If you don't need 80 gigabyte A100s, do not ask for 80 gigabyte A100s. And you should look for any possible way to say, I don't need 80 gigabyte A100s. A lot of people also want 8-way 80 gigabyte A100s on a single node. Good luck. It's just not there. There are a few, don't get me wrong. It's not zero, but it is very small. And you can see when you're dealing with 100 million GPU hours, those get snapped up pretty quickly. So that's our big problem. So how are we dealing with this, right? We had 6 resources at the initial call. Part of the delays were trying to get new resource providers on board to actually pick up some of those meritorious proposals. We have done so. And many have done a great job supporting those initial requests, which didn't actually even ask for them, right? They were picking up requests that they asked for some other resource. We are also working very hard to provide some support to all meritorious requests. So you may find that if you get an award, it may not be exactly what you asked for. It may be slightly less. There are several reasons for that, but it's to get you started, to help you out, and to see how you can progress, and then I'll provide you opportunities to go beyond that. Poor or no resource justification remains the major reason for declining proposals, right? If you want to learn anything about the NAIRR pilot, it's learn how you request a resource, like how do you justify what you need related to your project. And what we've seen is that there are a lot of new people showing up at the NAIRR pilot who have never had to do this before. As I mentioned, I've worked in this space for 30 years. That's what we do, right? I've seen it for 30 years. But there are new people in the NAIRR pilot who haven't had to do that, so it's great. We're happy to see you. Talk to us, right? We'll help you, but talk to us if you've never done it before, because it's an important skill when you start moving into the national scale resources. Again, again, the expectation of 80 gigabyte A100s will slow your proposal award as we try to figure out, can you use anything else? Because we really want to help you, but that's the hardest thing to find for you right now. Now, I want to move on here to a little bit more about where awards have been made. This slide, I think Katie showed in her talk. I won't go into the details here. Luckily, our numbers matched up pretty well, so I don't have to worry about the data. I'll just add here that if you're in one of the states where there is no number, you have your homework assignment. Go home, write a proposal, write a classroom request. We'd love to see those states filled in. If there's only a 1, you could be number 2. You know, join the club. It's great to see all of these places showing up in our requests. What kind of resources are asking? The vast majority, as expected, are R1 institutions, almost 70%. Not surprising. But we do have a large contingent of non-R1s, it's about 22%, which is great. We're glad you're here. I've met a couple at breakfast today. Nice to see you. And we even have a few nonprofits. About 7 of the requests or awards have been made to nonprofits. It's also wonderful to see you. Very few have been made to private sector partners, but there are a few others in the mix, but the vast majority to research institutions. And then who else gets added to these projects, right? Those are just the initial projects. We've also been working behind the scenes to add 409 additional persons onto these projects, 150 of them anyway, at 97 different institutions. So there's a whole other process behind the scenes that we're working to improve, but the RPs work with us to get these researchers onto the systems. The vast majority of those are grad students, and quite a few are undergraduate or postdocs as well. So here's the NAIRR pilot helping to train the next generation of researchers in AI and AI applications. Very happy to see all of this. Now, the last slide I'm going to show is the interesting one. Project computational usage and activity. About 40% of projects have done something. Most resources, but fewer than half have done something. And that's only of the 16 resources where we track usage. So not every resource is tracked in the same way. Most of the federal sector resources and the cloud providers do provide usage information. But of those we can track, only about fewer than half have done anything in the past year. And if you look at the actual resource consumption, the busiest resource has seen 26% of the allocations it's made used. And this is data through February. On the average resource, less than 10% that's been awarded has been used. And we often see 2 months or more in terms of from when they get the award to when the first usage appears. So one of our big challenges right now, and a concern from the resource providers, is the resources are there, and when we can make awards, they're not always being used. So there's clearly some disconnects, and we want to understand more today what's happening, how can we help with this. That's, again, the resources are there. It's important to recognize, too, anything that the resources had available last year is gone. This is stuff you can't bank. You can't bank time. Last year is last year. Those core hours or GPU hours, those are last year's GPU hours. This year, there's this year's GPU hours. So it's important that one of the issues to discuss and to solve is how do we get people on the systems using them. So I'm going to start wrapping up here with some thoughts, questions that we can all discuss today. You know, how can we improve this? You know, I know the support user experience team is offering office hours to potential proposers. Take advantage of that. We are happy to talk to you. We can provide you all sorts of guidance on how to write a proposal up until the point you submit the proposal. So definitely talk to us before it gets into the system. Once it's in the system, the process has to take place. We definitely want to continue promoting opportunities for non-R1 institutions. What can we offer to non-R1s that need these services? My soapbox is promoting this unique portfolio of private sector resources. There's so much out there. How do we take advantage of that? Again, we want to ensure that your proposals have the right content to move them through the process. right? Be very specific about what you need. Be sure that you specify the minimum requirements you need, not the maximum, right? A H100 will probably work, but if it can work well on a V100, maybe ask for that first because that's more available. And there's not everything is definitely there's parts on us about holding to the review and the resource matching timelines, right? We're working on that. It is definitely difficult. Better proposals will help, but we still need to do our part to make sure we're following our timelines as best we can. And please, I'm open to other ideas. All of us are, definitely want to know how we can improve all this. And again, related to the usage, how can we help your projects succeed? Especially, how do we help you use those awards once you have them? What is needed to get from proposal award to resource usage? And how can we make that happen more quickly, right? How do we line up those expectations between project readiness from your perspective and from our perspective? Readiness on our end means you're ready to jump on and start consuming GPU hours. But what if readiness for you means something else, right? Maybe the expectations are mismatched. So how do we adjust the process to make sure we get those lined up better? Just some of the questions for discussion today. Whoops. All right, so just to wrap up, I want to emphasize this is the work of many people, and I want to thank everyone who has been out there dealing with this not knowing what they were getting into, but still sitting there in the meetings anyway and helping us out. All of the allocations working group, many of them are here today. And of course, the many folks on the access allocations team working behind the scenes to make sure the submission site's up, to make sure the resource catalog is working and so forth. All the NAIRR pilot support groups, user experience, the portal team, operations and metrics are all there, from the access program, from SGX3, and the Skype awardees. Also, can't forget again to thank the reviewers. There's dozens of them around the country. They're all volunteers. I've met one here today. I've met others. Thanks again. And then, of course, the resource provider teams. They do a lot of work looking at these proposals, reviewing them, making sure they'll work with their hardware, setting up the projects, which is, yes, less than automatic than we'd like, but they've been powering through, and just generally onboarding the research teams. So it's been a lot of work. Thanks to all of them. And with that, thank you. Let me know how I can help.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions?
Well, you asked a question, so I think I can help you.
Okay.
So one thing that would greatly accelerate the usage is not to have the PI be the choke point in the process. So in the proposals, you made me list the several people who would be users. Mm-hmm. Any of them could respond probably 2 orders of magnitude faster than me to onboard. Yeah. But I can write the proposal 2 or 3 orders of magnitude faster than they can write it. Yep. So there's a mismatch there. Okay. And that causes a massive delay because once they get on and they do Hello World, mm-hmm. it's going to still take them a little while to use the resource. Mm-hmm. But getting me on, even not writing Hello World, after all the meetings and all the mm-hmm. other proposals and all the other activities, yep. it just creates a massive delay. Yep. And I can pretty much guarantee you that that's at least 70% of your problem.
Fair point. Appreciate the comment.
I'm not complaining, by the way,
right.
because I'm very grateful this resource exists, mm-hmm. and of course this is new, mm-hmm. and so it's not a surprise that some simple thing like that could be here. So I'm not saying anybody did something wrong. I'm just saying that you asked, and mm-hmm. so I'd like to help.
It's very much appreciated. Don't be like that's perfectly reasonable. Thank you for letting us know. I will add a comment about that process of adding other users. Right, there is a requirement we're managing with the program office that because this is a federal pilot, there is a step that requires the principal investigator to attest that the users are US based. This is...
Yeah, but you made us say that in the proposal.
Well, not quite, but I see what you mean.
Yeah.
But this is the challenge, right? And it's not enough that it was not enough at the time to get that in the proposal, because there was the difference was in the proposal there was a citizenship issue for some resources. So that was different than being U.S. based. And so there was a slight disconnect between the proposal requirement and the attestation requirement, but thank you, noted, and we will take that to the working group and see if we can accelerate the process somewhat in there. Yes.
Thank you. So I understand that the unused GPU hours will be forfeited after the project is over. Is there any procedure for the project that has unfinished the computation task after the project period is over to request the extension instead of resubmitting the whole thing from the beginning?
Yes. So if you have an active project and you've gone through your initial 12-month period or 6-month period, depending on your award, yes, you can submit an extension request. That is possible. Go back to the submission site, look for your project, and there's an option to submit an extension, which will, with coordination from the resource provider, be awarded or not. So the important thing in that process is to be sure you're coordinating with the resource provider to let them know you're interested, that you've got plans, that you're making progress. But yes, it is possible to just ask for more calendar time in the current system once you have your award.
First of all, thank you so much for pulling all of this together and all of the resources that you're making available to everyone.
Not me personally, but yes.
The whole team, the whole gestalt, right? What I wanted to bring up was, because most of the users are graduate students, what I noticed is that there is a culture, and getting them to move from whatever's the fastest, nearest thing into something that is going to be more sustainable, and having, the older folks, we've got the bigger picture, right? There may be individual research thrusts on any given project, and each one of them is associated with a lab, and maybe they're different labs and they already use a certain resource. So transitioning over, I have found that's been a big challenge. So the choke point of, who can approve access, right? And then the just understanding that culture change. And this other thought I wanted to leave you with is, I'm a PI for a DARPA challenge. And when you said, hey, be specific with us on what you want our requests to be, I'm not sure I could have done that. Like I would really try. And so maybe something to think about could be like a pipeline, where it's a phased approach, so that we're not wasting GPUs, because I've got my grandma's, voice in my ear about wasting food. I don't want to waste GPUs either, right? But maybe there's like a pipeline, so folks who are gathering resources and starting to learn what they will specifically need can begin down the pipeline, but then there's a way to trigger when actually those hours are turned on, or something like that. That might be something that could work.
Yes, thank you. So to the last point, yes, we are thinking about ways to allow that to happen. We recognize that in many cases, there's a need from some of the newer members of the AI community who are approaching these systems for the first time to actually understand how they need to be used, how they can translate that into what does my project really need. And so yes, we're exploring a number of ways there. Please take your comments to the follow-up sessions and bring them up, but yes, noted, and we are working on some options there. To the point of, yes, the grad students wanting to move from, wanting to use what they're familiar with. We recognize that as well, and the best option there is to be sure they reach out to the resource providers directly. They most have ticket systems. We have a NAIRR ticket system. There are people available to help with that transition. They do not have to do it alone. It's important, but we don't know if you don't ask. So it's important for new graduate students to know that there are support teams behind all these resources. They're not just GPUs with power sitting in a room. There are people they're willing to help and who know how to make that transition, have probably done it before. So that's the most important thing. Reach out, put in a ticket, and ask for help.
Just to add a couple of comments, as a former grad student, if my PI ever logged on to Bridges 2, I'll be shocked. So again, feeding back to the grad students getting access as soon as possible, because they're the ones who are no offense, going to actually do a lot of the work. And then I was surprised, as someone who anxiously awaited my maximize allocation decision, that there's a very big lag in use of resources versus reward. Do you have any idea why that is?
At least within the NAIRR pilot, part of the reason for the lag is that we see also a mismatch in expectations, I think, between what does ready mean, like as I mentioned, right? Ready, from the researcher perspective, might mean as soon as I know I'm getting this award, I am going to start my data gathering process. Okay, that means you're months away from actual resource need. And when the resource providers say you're ready to go, it means you finished that process. Some proposals have come in and say, okay, the first 2 months I'll do my literature review, right? They're even that far back. So we get, the timelines are mismatched in terms of when should you submit a proposal, what's a reasonable expectation between, quite honestly, if you submit the proposal now, you can get a lot of that done immediately, but when should you start, and like what is your expectation on the other end of like, well, if I don't get this, have I just wasted all the time doing the data preparation? Will I not be able to do it? So I understand there's a mismatch there, and that's what we're trying to figure out how to resolve that. But that's the reason for a lot of the delay is, oh, we're going to start now, but it's not start with the resource. We're going to start the further back in the timeline.
So do you think that it's a lot of like NAIRR pilot PIs who maybe necessarily didn't have experience with access? Because I find that like with access, you know, you're expected to fill out this kind of detailed plan for a maximize allocation. So I'm wondering, do you know the overlap between NAIRR and access?
We haven't done a deep investigation. There's two different namespaces, so right, it's hard to compare ORCID IDs with access IDs. But anecdotally, I'd say it's not as much overlap as people might have thought. We have identified a few, and we've dealt with a situation where people have applied for both access and NAIRR allocations. But the vast majority, I think the wonderful thing about NAIRR, from my perspective, is all the new people who are arriving. It presents us with a different level of problem, but it is great to see these new people here. But I think there's less overlap than you might think, than we thought, I think, going in as well.
Yep, and then just a comment on the grad students transitioning resources. We are more than happy to help you. If you're using NeoCortex or Bridges 2, please email us. We are more than happy to help you. Thank you.
Thanks.
You both have to be fast.
I have a quick comment about NAIRR Secure. So we work a lot with healthcare data, and security is a big concern. So any support in making it easier to find which resources support secure would be very helpful, but also the startup time that you mentioned. A lot of delay on our end has been getting BAs with our hospital systems to allow us to put data there. So I understand that it is also university specific, but if there is any possibility, before we know which resource provider we are matched to, we cannot get a BA done. So if there is any possibility to streamline that process, that would make resource utilization go way faster.
Interesting. That's a comment we'll have to take back. I don't have a great answer for that at the moment. I can say about NAIRR Secure is that is separate from this NAIRR pilot. I think you might talk to the NSF folks who are here to get a better sense of how NAIRR Secure works. I can add that several of the cloud providers, though, can support HIPAA compliance in their projects. So that is an option, at least I believe Amazon and Microsoft can support those options. So there is some availability of that in the system. But yeah, great point about, again, the chicken and egg problem of, do you start before you have the resource, or do you start to get and be ready for the resource? It's a part that we definitely need to sort out, and we're not quite sure exactly how. So your feedback today is definitely important on that. Yep.
Thank you so much for the presentation and for this pilot effort. My name is Anna Lucic. I'm from the University of Illinois. I have a question about, I think this is related to a couple of other comments that have already been made, but I think it would be helpful to kind of like specify what does it mean for data to be ML ready and what does it mean for data to be AI ready. And this is actually slowing me down in my project because actually for data to be AI ready, this is a specific thing and it takes a lot of time. So I'm curious about your comments.
Well, you're getting beyond my pay grade in terms of the having the data be AI ready. That is, again, I think a great comment to bring up, and I think we've identified that as an issue for the NAIRR pilot more broadly in terms of there's definitely interest in the AI aspects, but there are still people who need more AI training to get to the point where, well, what does it mean for my data to be AI ready? Being in Illinois, there's some definitely resources locally for you. Talk to the folks at NCSA. There's Brett right next to you. Might have some options locally for you. But yes, definitely a great question to bring up. And I think you could talk to Shelley Knuth about the User Experience Working Group and how that might be able to help you as well. There's the Skype team and others who might have offerings.
Okay, I'm going to get it. Katie gets the last word.
Please.
I just want to extend my thanks again to our NAIRR pilot operations teams that have taken on probably a bigger load than they expected. I just want to note the reason you do a pilot is because you don't exactly know how to do something. And so we love this feedback. We're going to change and we're going to adapt in the second year. So please keep your comments coming in the afternoon, in the later sessions, and know that we're really listening and all of our teams are taking notes here in order to improve this for the community.
Thank you. Let's thank Katie and Dave.